Okay, greetings one and all, and welcome back to the Amoda Maa podcast with Amoda and myself, Kavi. Today we are delighted to have once again back visiting Henry Shukman. Hello, Henry.
Hi, it's great to be back with you. Thank you very much for having me on again.
Beautiful. Hello, Amoda.
Hi, Kavi. I'm always here.
You. Yeah, you're always here. Yeah. Okay, so let's launch in. Those of you who haven't listened to previous podcasts will not know about Henry, but Henry Shukman is a Zen teacher stroke master at the Mountain Cloud Zen Center here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and the author of his book, One Blade of Grass. Now, today, we're going to explore a juicy subject titled, at least tentatively titled, Two Different Paths, One Awakening. One traditional, Zen, and the other without any tradition or teacher. And yet both have experienced profound awakening in which everything changed and some things didn't, maybe. We're going to look into that. We're going to explore that. So as a way of diving into this, exploration, this conversation, primarily between the two of you. I'd like you both individually, I think we'll start actually with Henry, to describe the experience briefly. We don't have to, explore it for hours. The experience of the awakening that changed everything and maybe still left some things unchanged. And what actually changed, and then we'll dive in from there. So if that seems good to you guys, we'll start there.
Okay. Hey, thanks so much. Of course, it is a juicy topic. It's the most wondrous topic, perhaps of all. Although maybe it's not quite right to call it a topic. I don't know, but yeah. I mean, I just want to say, actually, I slightly don't quite feel it was quite right to say mine was like traditional, totally. There's something about it that's beyond any tradition, and must be. And I think I feel more it's about having a context, whatever the context might be, that helps it happen. I mean, I'd already had various awakening experiences, that were put me on the path. And I don't sort of discount those just because they weren't pivotal in the sense that it wasn't really where there was a major shift, but still they were important. They were part of a process. And so, but anyway, getting to the heart of the matter is like, what is there truly a major shift, and what is it, and what was it for me? And I mean, the answer is that, yeah, I totally know there is. And I have to say also that I didn't believe it prior. I had various, awakenings and done quite a lot of practice, both in what was, it could seem it's more the spiritual realm and also psychological. And, I seem to, however sort of free and clear I sometimes got, I'd sort of come back to this troublesome version of me, and swinging back and forth kind of thing, in clarity, out of it, and I'm not totally sold on the word clarity, by the way, but just some sense of that. And then there was a point where, cutting to the chase, where, in my case, it was like basically everything disappeared, or it was revealed that somehow there never had been anything. Somehow there was what I've called one of my teachers has a goneness, a total goneness, a total amazing absence, and a real nothing, a nothing at allness. And somehow thereafter it's like things sort of reconstitute, but there's just a built-in inseparability. It's like it's not somehow that thing that could separate seemed to have got knocked out. And it was the most beautiful thing. That's by far the most beautiful thing, that ever happened in my lifetime, and it felt like it was, in some sense, there's a phrase in some of the Buddhist sutras, what needed to be done has been done, or something like that. And it did feel like that, and kind of continues to. And it's weird that, I can point to time and place precisely, really, where it happened. But what it was ever since is still here. It's beautifully still here.
Could I before I get to you, Amoda, I would like to ask what precipitated that experience, let's call it, and was that experience momentary, minutely? Did it last an hour? The intent, I'm talking about that direct experience. Can you say?
Yeah. In terms of sort of build up, or preamble, there's stuff going on in the hours before, in the days before, in the weeks, and the years and decades before. I think yes. In a way, that was the, is it the precipice, cliff, the abyss, or whatever? It's got nice names too, but the blowing out, whatever, that I'd been on the trail of without really knowing, without any idea of what it was. There was just some sense of some possibility, but I didn't know what it was, but that I think I'd been drawn to it. I think a lot of my, the trouble and trauma I'd been through and stuff, I can see in a way it all was guiding me sort of in that direction somehow, but that's a good question, really, because I think the strongest impression that I could say about it was like just nothing, and but it wasn't somehow just nothing, and so of course no time or space. I would say even no consciousness. Somehow I feel that was gone as well, and kind of reconstituted or came back in a new way thereafter, when it doesn't even feel like quite the same consciousness. Anyway, Kavi, I don't know how long. I don't know. And it's because in some sense, I think I'm dying to hear what Amoda has to say, but in some sense, I do feel, whatever it is hasn't stopped, can't stop, won't stop, never started. It's and it's no different from this chatting like this. I don't know. I'm dying to hear what you have to say.
No, I understand that, because the mind obviously wants to fix it in location and space and time. But actually some of what you're describing, and I know some of what Amoda describes, is like, well, it might have started in a sense there, but it's carried on ever since. So was it there then, or is it here now? It's impossible to answer that question. So okay, that's really good. Thank you, Henry. Amoda, let's. This is great. This is great fun.
Yeah, I love it.
Two teachers trying to describe the indescribable.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Well, like you, without going into the history of it, it's a build-up. And you don't know that at the time. Yeah, every crisis, every self-torture, if you like, on the path of being human is always a doorway or a catalyst to something. One doesn't know it at the time, but only in retrospect you can say, well, of course there was a build-up. I wasn't on a traditional spiritual path, although I was a spiritual seeker in a very broad sense, from the metaphysical to the esoteric, to the psychological, to the self-help, to the Buddhist, to the Zen, not to the degree that you have in following one path, but I was a kind of real magpie, if you like, and found a truth in everything, yeah, and so on. So yes, I was a spiritual seeker, but I didn't follow any particular path. But in retrospect, I can see or say what was the core path that was pathless that built up to this point. But let me describe the point if I can. And like you, it was definitely, I had many awakenings. I didn't call them awakenings at the time, but they were cosmic consciousness and mystical experiences and openings and transformations and shifts in perception. None of it really changed anything fundamental at the core. Yeah. And then this moment, not this moment, but that moment, the moment when everything changed. And I can say that like you as well. It's like everything changed, and that change hasn't ever changed. Yeah. In the sense that there was a moment where, like you, it's like a stop. And I think you might have said this somewhere. I've heard you say it's a death. Yeah, and I experienced it as a death. A death of what? Because obviously we're still here, alive. Yeah. One way of describing it, and yeah, perhaps understanding it, is like a death of every structure of self, every psychological structure of self, everything that I think I am, everything that I strive for, everything that I believe, everything that I sort of myself stands on. It's like the whole thing came undone. And in that undoing, it's not as if you, well, for me anyway, I'll speak for myself. It's not as if I had a moment of cosmic consciousness, but rather, like you, everything stopped. It was like a absolute nothingness. No. And simultaneously, everything gets reborn.
Yeah.
But from that moment on, everything is fundamentally different. Now, obviously, this table isn't different, and this body actually isn't different. But the relationship to everything is different. Inseparable from what is. It's like the veil of self has come undone. For me, that was the way that I kind of knew or experienced it is different, which was kind of a moment-to-moment revelation, was that the structure of self that had been in place throughout all of my life, that I wasn't aware was the main pin that held this self together, was the victim. Now, that victim played itself out in many ways. One is just being a victim of what I'm experiencing. I experience a good feeling and I feel good about myself. I experience a bad feeling and I feel bad about myself or about life or about whatever it is. That's being a victim, because you're at the behest of something that is impermanent. You're at the behest of thought or feeling or belief or experience. And without that, there's no victim. There's no separation. There's no me having an experience and an interpretation of that experience. There's just a very open, naked, whatever is here. So it's like these veils come undone. And that's freedom.
Yeah.
Well, that's one way of describing it. I could probably describe it in different ways, and I probably do each time, because it's not fixable, is it? It's not a formula, it's not a method. But there is I sort of experienced it as the main pin just got pulled out.
Yeah.
And there was nothing to stand on. It was just naked. It was without without an interpretation of what it was experiencing.
So it was direct. That's more.
Yeah, what direct experience without the layers of identity and interpretation that are that are part of the just sort of normal, if you like, unconscious state. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
And did yours was yours precipitated? I don't mean over a period of time necessarily, because of course it was precipitated by everything that you've previously done in a sense. I mean directly on the day, in the hour, in the moment.
Yes.
Yeah, and those few minutes before something happened.
Yes.
I mean, I guess I'm trying to get to, is there anything to be talked about with cause and effect here?
Well, there was, for me, there was, well, actually, it was over a period of a few months, although you could say over a lifetime, but over a period of a few months, a inner landscape of what was becoming an abyss was building up inside of my experience, just in ordinary life. Yeah, just, I don't know, I was just aware of it. It felt initially like a kind of desolate, empty inner landscape. And as I got closer to it, it felt like an abyss in which I would no longer exist. So there was a sense that if I got close to this abyss, I would no longer exist. This is a feeling. Yes, it wasn't sort of understood conceptually. And what precipitated, if you like, the death and rebirth, or the waking up out of the dream self, was that in that moment, that this abyss, and it was a moment when I was sitting alone in my flat in London, and I was sitting on my sofa, and I just felt this very, very palpably, very close to me. And I noticed, that's the key thing, I noticed, I was very aware of the movement of mind in that moment that said, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have a cup of tea?
How very English, huh?
Yes, very English,
darling.
but not with anyone, with myself. Yeah, of course, there's no harm in having a cup of tea. But I noticed, and for some reason in that moment, it wasn't just an innocent, oh, let's have a cup of tea. It was a lifetime, and the weight of many lifetimes, if there are many lifetimes, I don't really know, but it felt like the weight of not even my lifetime, I would say humanity's movement away from this stop, this pause, this death in the moment of the seeking self. I felt that like a huge burden, ancient, and I saw it in myself, and I saw it in the unconscious mind, the seeking mind, the ego mind. And it was just like a blip of a moment, a nano moment. And in that moment, instead of getting up to have a cup of tea, which would have been an avoidance of what is here, I just stayed. And that staying, I had no idea. It was just like this pull. One pull was the seeking to move away from it. And then this other kind of pull that said, stop, just stay. And in that moment, and I had no idea this would happen, died, the self died, and then was reborn. It died into nothingness, and it was reborn as the totality. Now, in itself, it wasn't some amazing, like I say, cosmic consciousness, all-knowing experience. But from that moment on, everything was different. There was no more seeking. It's like the stop was all that was here. So it was a very pure and innocent and naked meeting of life without any avoidance. It was just this. And this went on and on, yeah, day after day, minute after minute, yeah, and so everything was almost new in that way. Now, I don't call that a bliss state. It wasn't experienced as bliss. It was experienced as a kind of joy, not an elevated joy, but there was no more fear of what is here. Yeah, fear came to an end. There's just this, there's just this, there's just this, there's just this. But life continued. Ordinary. It was ordinary, yeah. But it was fundamentally different.
I'm gonna throw this to Henry in a second. But did your very eloquent, descriptive way of speaking to it, was that apparent at the time, or has that been? Have you developed that in some way as you've seen deeper into its significance at the time? Yeah.
Are you asking Henry?
Yes.
Me?
No, I'm asking you first, Amoda.
Me? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say that the description of it has come in retrospect.
Yeah.
At the time, there were no words for it. It was more a knowing of it. And without any language or context, in a spiritual context, I did not grasp for any way to describe it. Yeah. Well, you knew me shortly after that, Kavi, so you know that I was often speechless or wordless in any attempt to speak from that, as that, or about that. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, without, if you like, a context of what we call these days non-duality or Advaita or satsang, without that context where there is a kind of language field in that, I was wordless. So that's kind of come about as I've understood in retrospect what took place.
Okay, Henry, how does that? What does that speak to in you? Well, first of all, there's the demolition, there's the deconstruction, or almost a death and a rebirth that seems to, there's something similar in what you're both describing. So yeah, let's just land that in you. What does that strike in you? Not just what I just said, but what Amoda said.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot in that, and let me just see how what's bubbling up. Definitely. I mean, I'd say it's actually like the whole point really is rebirth. It's not really rebirth, it's first birth now. It's constantly being born. Everything is being born now. That's really what doesn't stop. That's constantly new, therefore constantly changing, but the process doesn't stop. And that's the critical facet of the experience. We're knocked out. I love that phrase. I think you used it. Something was knocked out. Exactly. The linchpin was taken out. But actually, basically, we might say, I don't know if it's too crude, but just the separator is knocked out. But it's not only that; it's everything is knocked out. The one that constructs reality, that makes reality, knocked out, and thereafter, from thus the total goneness, the nothing at allness, you said nothingness, exactly. From that, it's always a new birth now, and that's what I feel. So it's experience. That's why it doesn't stop, because it's back to that, down to nothing, and then always new birth now, every moment. is all really born now. So that's right on. And what comes with that, I think you put this beautifully, Amoda, that the ordinariness is somehow the sweetest thing, is just the ordinariness. I mean, that's really somehow the landing is in ordinariness. It's I totally agree. None of the cosmic. I mean, in a way, you know, lifting up a cup of tea is utterly cosmic if you want to go there, but you don't need to. It's just ordinary, and the ordinary way. That's a Zen phrase. Ordinary mind is the way. Ordinary experience is the way with a capital W. Is a great awakened reality or something. Is the ordinary, and it's so sweet. It's so kind of naturally intimate, you know, to what all this, yeah, right on, just this. That's, you know, that's classic Zen, by the way. To talk about just this is totally Zen. I think you picked up some Zen probably from Osho, right, along the way somewhere. I don't know, and I'm speculating.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm organically, naturally, for whatever reason, I'm in some ways the fragrance of Zen and the fragrance of Tantra. That's what it is, if I have to label it as something. And if you look at Osho, yes, I would say that's Zen and Tantra in the deepest sense. Yeah. And I was immersed in that field for a while. I didn't understand a word he was saying or what I was reading in the books, but the frequency of it, the fragrance of it, that just came home in me, and it felt home to me. So yes, there is that. Yeah,
beautiful, beautiful. And but also the point about speech, talking about it. I mean, I totally relate to that. I'd been a writer since my early teens, and I was very identified, you know, with writing poetry, writing fiction, writing non-fiction, and there was just blessed silence, and the need or the urge or the impulse to pick up a pen, it was gone. And it was like, you know, a blessed relief. It was silence, you know, no need to talk about it. What could ever be said, you know? And then years on, gradually, you know, I was kind of called on to start speaking about it in some way, you know, in the Zen center that invited me in, and I you know, just sort of started to try to articulate some stuff, and used Zen in certain way, because Zen has a, you know, actually kind of a beautiful tradition of poetry that is of poetry of awakening. Poetry sort of out of awakening, and so there is, you know, there's material that if you want to, you can sort of pick up and sort of speak to, you know, and I started doing that. I started doing that with the Zen koans as well, which I think are kind of lovely. They get more lovely the clearer we are, kind of thing. You know, but you know, of course, they're only one set of tools within one stream, and there are 10,000 streams, and you know, 10,000, 84,000 Dharma doors, Dharma gates, and you know, it's always right here. It's always right here. There's a great line actually from one of these old masters, Jiao Zhou. He said, from here, the town where he lived was actually called Jiao Zhou. He took his name from it. That from Jiao Zhou to the capital city, Chang'an, is 800 miles. From Chang'an, the capital, to Jiaozhou is no distance at all. So it's metaphorical kind of thing. And it is and it isn't, actually. And I think it's very beautiful. From here, I don't know if we're really being crude, from here to awakening is 10,000 miles. From awakening to here is no distance at all.
That's great. Thank you for breaking that down as well. That's really good.
Thank you. Yes.
But at the same time, it's also true that from here to LA, I'm not in LA, by the way, from here to Santa Fe is 900 miles. And from Santa Fe to here is no distance at all. Yeah. You know, that's actually true as well.
Yeah. So talking about sort of describing it and language, one of the other kind of let's say aspects of mind or self that changed for me was that whilst I say I have no tradition and there wasn't a path, but I had been immersed in many things, I had acquired a lot of knowledge. Yeah, I was a reader, I was an investigator, I tried lots of meditation. I've been to Buddhist centers and Zen centers and this and that. So I have gone in on quite a deep level.
Yes.
So I could have called on some of that knowledge and understanding to describe or to speak from. But one of the things that did change in the thisness of this experience was that knowledge no longer came into the thisness. So the nakedness of experience was also the nakedness of mind's knowledge, without knowledge. So it had to find its own way of speaking it. If it needed to speak it, I had no desire to go out and tell people anything about it whatsoever. Like you, after many, many years, there was a calling. My calling came from not outside of me, but from inside of me. But it doesn't matter, because inside, outside, there was no separation anymore. But the impulse to speak from it did arise at some point, but without the knowledge, without the language. So a kind of great not knowing came about.
Yes. That's beautiful. That's exactly that's what we speak from, right? Out of not knowing. It's from not knowing that do we in a sense do we even know what we're saying, you know?
Well, that would be a question in a way, because I would say in some ways that neither of you know what you're talking about. I know it sounds ridiculous, but actually it's true in some ways, because the knowing, you know, the mind, the narrator, the describer is something that you both have to grapple with, because most people are in narrating self, but your narrators have both died, in effect, to use a dramatic word. So the narrator, the past narrator, is part of what dissolved in the main pin coming out. So you're both, obviously you've still got the language, you've still got the words, you've still got all that you've been kind of trained for, but you're both trying to describe something that is pretty much indescribable, as you've both said. So you flounder. And the thing that I've noticed about Amoda particularly, and I would imagine about you, is you're comfortable with that floundering.
Yeah, but Amoda, I would guess you're trying not so much to describe it as to convey it.
Yes, I mean, I rarely describe awakening as an experience, because that's what people mostly want. They read about it in a book, they hear your story, they hear my story, it sounds fabulous, and they want to recreate that. And I find that a great stumbling block, block. So I rarely speak about it unless I'm asked directly, like we're having this conversation now occasionally in interactions, but it's always pointed to in a different way. So rather than describing it, we're pointing to freedom, pointing to that which is free already here now, in the unique interaction with each individual. Therefore, it's never described in the same way. Therefore, it's never a formula. Therefore, it's never a principle, a teaching in that way. It's always a pointing to what's already here, free.
Hey, I want to just ask you whether you feel this too, because I'm with you totally. And I also get this feeling sometimes, it's not so much, I want to know if you get this too, that it's not so much pointing to, it's just kind of sort of expressing from. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
Does that resonate with you?
Yes, it's both. It's both. Yeah. I mean, you are what you are. You are either living from this or not.
Yeah.
And so that living from it, being from it, that, although it's invisible, it's like a, well, again, I use the word fragrance or frequency field that can have an impact on others, or it's, I don't know, it's not by example, but it's sort of what we pick up from each other naturally. So of course we're speaking from it. We couldn't do anything else, really.
Yeah, and everybody else kind of, it's there with them as well. So it's not like they've got to get something they don't already have.
That's right.
And I like that word field. I feel I get that vibrational field or something, that speaking from, it's some kind of almost tangible thing. You know, it's something sent. It's something more than sense, lived. It's a field. It's good. But
I think sorry to interrupt.
No, go right ahead.
Well, I was going to say that you guys actually are representatives of what I feel is ordinary, the ordinariness, which is not ordinary in the conventional sense of the word, but is an ordinary speaking from it, speaking to it, dancing around it. And I know that, I'm not sure about Zen traditions, but some of the more highfalutin Indian traditions, for instance, have talked from the field in some, very profound, very grandiose kind of way, which actually to me creates a distance from the ordinaries. The actual ordinariness actually speaks to something very, very beautiful, because it brings it down into the into the human realm of possibility, which is not a great word, but it's because you said, Henry, it's an ongoing life movement for you. Well, that's the very same. So you can only speak from it.
Yeah.
Whereas other people would think that you're describing it, and Amoda's had this before, and we've had this before, and somebody would say, "Oh, I love what you're saying. Where do you get your ideas?" And so she has to answer that. And I would imagine there's a similar thing, although maybe not in the same way, with you. These are not ideas, right?
They're not ideas. That's it, right on. Exactly.
So if they're not ideas, here we go. Then that's what we're speaking to. What are they?
Yeah, I must say I won't speak for long at all, but I just a note that's one thing I kind of like about Zen's koans, because they're always about concrete things. Like, there's one where somebody asked, like, what is awakening, in slightly different language, but something like that. What is awakening? And the teacher says, "Pass me the water jug." And the guy passes it, and the teacher says, "Did you get it?" And the guy says, "No." And he says, "Put the water jug back." And he does. And he doesn't get it right then, but maybe he will later. Who knows? But
right.
This is it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's that's really not what the seeking mind wants. It wants the spectacular experience, or the spectacular transformation, or the elevation from the human experience, and that's why in the, if you like, the ordinary, it's either picked up, as something authentic and true, or it can be missed by the seeking mind that's looking for something more spectacular than this. And I think that's what Kavi is referring to in the real traditional Enlightenment kind of picture, if you like. We're only the enlightened one is only speaking to the absolute, from the absolute, and we can all do that. We can all gaze into each other's eyes and speak in this sort of way and put on that aura, but that's not it.
That's still something separate, really. It's still something
and I
else.
think so the integration, if you like, of the ordinary human being, because like you like me like you, we live a life, as well as being teachers and being in a certain role. We live a life, we have partners, and we operate in as far as I know, an ordinary way.
Exactly.
And whilst everything has changed in that, and one isn't caught in the matrix, the matrix of belief, opinion, social structures, if you like. We could go on about that. That's another topic. But the matrix of the self, there is an ordinariness, and to be able to be that, or just allow that without having to be an enlightened self, that has, I think, a frequency field to it that is either overlooked or is received, if you like, or met in that really helps. I think it helps others to well, not to get it, but to I don't know what it is. It's like a reflection, isn't it? It's like
maybe make it a little easier to get that it's already here.
Yes.
I really wanted to pick up on something you said earlier, actually, that just came back to me when you're talking about the seeking mind, because you said somewhere in your story, 20 minutes ago, whatever, you said, you stopped being a seeker. And I totally relate to that. We've arrived, we're home, we're here, and I wondered about, because I love that fact, actually, and that there's a book that has a title, I Sought and I Found, which is a story of a seeker. I thought it's a great title. But hey, I'm just wondering, whether that seeking mind, clearly that gets knocked out. Among the constellation of constructions that get knocked out, that's in there too.
Well, yes, I think that's fundamental, because the unconscious human being, the unawakened human being, the one who has not come home to true nature, is operating in the seeking mind. Whether it's spiritual seeking, whether it's seeking for happiness, gratification, satisfaction, comfort, safety, through anything, any experience, through seeking for this moment to be different than it is, through it's never enough. So that's fundamentally the driving mechanism.
Yes.
And I think when we say the main pin, or when I say the main pin has been pulled out, I think that's what it is.
That's what it is. Yeah.
It has a particular flavor for each one. For me, it was a kind of sense of abandonment by life, therefore, you know, seeking somehow through that to know that I was not abandoned. So that has all sorts of ramifications in terms of behavior, actions, relationships, beliefs, and so on. So everyone will have a kind of unique personal flavor, whether it's abandonment, whether it's safety, whether it's whatever it might be. But the main pin itself is ultimately the seeking, the seeking mind, the seeking self, the seeking mechanism. That comes to an end.
Right.
So
I don't know if you find anything. I don't think it's about finding it.
So
no, well, but the seeking is over. That's what finding means.
Is over.
But is
That's
that seeking also including the seeking of relief from suffering?
I guess it must be.
Yes.
It's looking for something else.
Well, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? If I may say, in that, in order to seek relief from suffering, there's two aspects to two sides of that. One is the seeking of relief from suffering by avoiding what is, and the other is the seeking of relief from suffering by getting to the root cause of suffering, which is the avoidance of what is.
That's the yes. So the second path leads to the first path.
Well, no, the second path leads to true freedom. The first way seeks to avoidance and more, you know, more, if you like, getting lost in the dream state.
See, I hear you both your stories have a similar quality in that I think you're both right, because like most human beings, you've both been tormented on some level by personal suffering, by personal stories, by the experience of the movement through life. And the question would be, did that come to an end? The story of personal suffering, did that come to an end for both of you? And is that a significant part of releasing that, of letting go of that, to be living here now, here now, here now, here now?
I say yes to that. Absolutely, yes. The self that is suffering comes to an end. Yeah. The self that has a story about suffering, my problems, my victim identity. That's what my problems are. Of course, this is where the ordinary comes in. You asked right at the beginning, Kavi, what doesn't change? Well, we still have a human experience, challenges. Maybe they're financial, maybe they're physical, maybe they're relational. Yeah, there are still the interaction with the world, which has all sorts of, I wouldn't say problems, but the human experience may bring loss, it may bring change and all of that. But the story of me suffering in that comes to an end. The story of me being a victim of that comes to an end. If there's pain, we just feel pain.
And so Henry, how does that speak to you?
Yeah, that's very beautiful. One thing that comes up for me actually is that I want to be careful how I put this, because I don't want to overdo it, but I have been ever since, somehow, or at some point thereafter, somehow more, I don't know how I want to put it, but more aware, more sensitive to, the suffering of others, in a way that I really wasn't as much before. I'd say it feels like, again, I don't want to overstate this, but, you know, it seems like my heart is a lot more tender than it used to be, actually. I think I suffered more, but had a less tender heart somehow. It was, I guess it was just way more defended. And therefore, that was a feature of its suffering. Defenses that came out of the story of me, and so now, I mean, I wouldn't say that I don't sort of feel suffering in the world. I do. I feel quite quite tender, really.
But that's the story of suffering and the direct experience of suffering are two things that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's it's just the end of what Amoda called the victim.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not the end of the capacity to feel. Amoda?
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, Henry. Absolutely. I mean, that's another feature that we haven't spoken about until now. We've spoken about the seeking mind and certain structures of self, but that's fundamentally it. Heart and mind became one. Heart and the world became one. Everything is one. Everything's included. So there's an incredible sensitivity to everything, incredible sensitivity to the movement of mind and the seeking mind and the suffering in others, because it's known. A, it's known. Yeah, because you've experienced it. And B, there isn't anything. Yeah, you're right. All the defenses of the heart. That's what that came about. Yeah. I mean, I was on that path anyway. That's the tantric path, if you like. For me, that was part of the precursor to this. But yes, I mean, heart, mind, there's no separation. Me, other, there's no separation. But the story of suffering isn't there. Suffering, yes, the exquisiteness, or the kind of bittersweet exquisiteness of the human experience, whether it's yours, mine, somebody else's, that's felt. The felt sense is all there is. So there's no defendedness. But that doesn't mean that we but at the same time, you can see through the suffering that's created by the victim identity, the poor me identity, the story of the me and my problems and that kind of thing. It stops being a problem on that level.
Yeah. That's beautifully put, Amoda. I totally agree. I'm wondering just where my mind just went there. By the way, how are we doing for time?
Oh, we're hold on, let's just have a look. Yeah, we've got another 10-15 minutes. I think we could.
I'll tell you what, I was just suddenly curious as a topic is like, you know, how much does the suffering, how much do you feel the suffering that you went through prior, you know, with your, as you spoke, even in this conversation, and I know you've written about it, how much, I want to ask some question around like, how much do you feel, and then I could take it to myself as well, that our sensitivity to that suffering or something when we were, you know, younger and in our life biography, how much does it matter that, how much was that a driver that kept us not satisfied in our quote unquote seeking until really something was fully resolved? You know what I mean? How much does the suffering that somebody might be living with, how much does that play a role? I mean, maybe it's a dumb question. I don't know.
You know what I mean?
There's something in there. What do you think?
On the contrary, I was, you know, if we'd have had, I mean, one has to follow this river wherever it goes. Yeah. And, but I was hoping to kind of have that conversation as well, because, and I did allude to that at the beginning of, is that involved in cause and effect, or to what extent does that matter, and just how? Yeah, just open up that conversation. So both of you, I want to speak to that. Maybe we could just use that as some kind of completion, because I think this is a conversation that could go on for a very long time, because there's so many nuances. It's a really interesting conversation. Beautiful. So
yeah, I would say yes. I think certainly in my life and in what I've come to know by, well, I came to know it, if you like, in that moment. Yeah. The moment of, death and rebirth, awakening, whatever we want to call it. That moment, when I felt the momentum of the seeking mind moving away from this moment as it is, moving away. Yeah. When I felt that, not just as my momentum, but humanity's momentum, I kind of knew, again, not an intellectual knowing, it's kind of known in the depth of being, that unless there comes a tipping point of personal suffering, there can be no true transformation. But that personal suffering is not necessarily the circumstances, although often it's instigated by circumstances, childhood circumstances, life circumstances. But the psychological suffering of, to put it in simple or crude terms, I'm not good enough, life isn't enough, I need to move to the next moment, I need to find this, I need to feel loved. Yeah, all unconscious mechanisms that drive. Yeah, when that momentum builds up, so there's a sense of suffering, which we often blame our circumstances for, but when we actually start to see that it's just a mechanism within the self that just builds up a momentum, and there's almost a tipping point where I can't live with this anymore. I can't live with myself as this anymore. Yeah, for me, in my experience, that would actually lead to episodes of being on the brink of suicide. I mean, literally, when I was younger, because it was a tipping point that would come. Now, I didn't have the consciousness or awareness to actually stay right here. And so I would either try some attempt at that, obviously didn't work out very well, or I would suppress that until it finally re-emerged again as the abyss of being, which really was the same invitation as an episode of, I can't live with myself. Yeah, I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to end this. That was a build-up of a momentum of personal suffering, psychological suffering. And that was what was recognized in that moment. So I think there is something, because unless you come to that, then spirituality is just a hobby. Or a feel good, or a luxury, or something you pick up and put down to make you feel better. But it stops being a matter of a nice spiritual practice, and actually starts being a matter of life and death.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. God, you put it incredibly well. I can relate to all of that. I don't know that, I'm wondering whether you had that clarity about it only after. I'm assuming that might be the case. Yeah.
I had that clarity in the moment that it was seen.
Yeah, exactly.
But
It's
in the moment that it's seen, it's a nano moment. It's not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's like suddenly, totally seeing, it's recognized, and a whole load of cascading structures collapse.
Yes.
Yeah, I get it.
And then when everything's reformed itself or reconstituted in a new way, it's not like you become a perfect self. Amoda didn't really change, but something fundamentally in her inner structure changed. Then there's more ability to put it into its context in this way.
Yes.
But it was seen in that moment.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it, how the instant of clear seeing can be that is the transformative thing. Yes.
And it's got nothing to do with the intellect. It's nothing to do with any knowledge or understanding.
No. It's funny, actually, I keep... Sorry, did you want to say more?
No.
I was just going to mention something, that when you were talking earlier about that I'm going to have a cup of tea, it actually reminded me that the very morning, or was it the morning before? It was around the time that I fell away, or whatever, that experience we're talking about earlier. I think it was that very morning. I was up very early, and I was kind of, brushed my teeth, washed my face, got dressed, and I recognized this desire to have a cup of tea rise up in me, and this wasn't my moment, but I did see this desire for a cup of tea really clearly, and I realized, oh, it's quite strong and it's quite heavy. Somehow there's a weight in this wish for a cup of tea, and I don't need it. And I just put it aside and was back in a freedom. I mean, it wasn't the precipitating event that came later, but it's just a funny little coincidence.
Yes.
There was a cup of tea moment.
You see, we can have a cup of tea. Like now, I can have a cup of tea, but it's very, what shall I call it? It's sort of empty.
Yeah, exactly. It's empty.
It's empty of any strategy to avoid this moment.
Yeah,
it's a natural arising. Of course, we eat, we drink, we move around, we do things.
Exactly.
So it's a kind of innocent activity.
Exactly.
But it's not innocent when it's a strategy to avoid the discomfort of this moment.
Right. That's
so. Let me. I want to go to Henry, because you had your description, Amoda, of the kind of personal story, if you like, that led up to that was included in that. But Henry, do you see that? Do you know that? Do you recognize that in yourself?
Well, I was wondering why some of us just won't settle for less. Do you know what I mean? That was what I was wondering, really. I mean, clearly, Amoda, you were one of those people who won't settle for less. I mean, I don't know whether you'd agree with that description, but it kind of looks that way to me, that some of us, we don't know that we're going to get there, but we know we're still trying, kind of thing. I mean, I remember afterwards, I felt like I'd been like this was just one way that came to me at some point, was like a sort of like a cow in a great big hay rick, totally sort of trapped in it, but kept on pushing, didn't really know what else to do, didn't even recognize that it was pushing. It was just stuck under this great mound of hay or straw, pushing, didn't really even know why. And sure enough, eventually kind of burst out of it. But I hadn't known really that I was trying to burst out of it. Hadn't known that it was really possible to burst out of it, but I wouldn't stop pushing. I recognized that something in me just wouldn't let up, just kept pushing, even though it didn't know why it was pushing, or it was pushing in a certain direction or anything. And then all of a sudden, boom, it was out. It was out. Yeah, it had broken out. It had got free of this great mound of straw it had been blindly living in. And it's a crude metaphor, but I recognize, so I was thinking, what is it that makes the kind of person that apparently we both are, that won't stop pushing in that crude metaphor, whereas others might, do you know what I mean? Do you see what I'm getting at?
I understand that completely. Because just for my own self, in the 90s, I had a teacher who expressed something about totality, and I heard what he said about totality, and totality to me meant all in, nothing left behind. So when the invitation, for instance, was there to sit in the sweat lodge, it wasn't trying to avoid the fire of the sweat lodge. It was sitting right on the fire of the sweat lodge, so that it would completely toast me, and that there was no avoidance. And I know a lot of other people wouldn't want or have the capacity in whatever way to do what was being required, in a sense. So I followed the path of totality, which, you know, is and when you speak like that, I hear some of that. I hear that both of you have been total. That's what keeps you you were describing the cow. That's what keeps you just kind of going without even knowing what you're going for, what you're doing it for, because there's no end goal. That's one of the problems with the seeking mind, is it imagines the end goal.
I think, yeah, I think all of that, and it's kind of a unanswerable deep well of a question, really, isn't it? I mean,
that's what we're here for.
as a you know, I know for myself, even as a child, the empty void was more inviting than the place where it was filled up with things, whatever things are, you know, worldly things.
Yeah.
The empty void of beingness was actually a very natural place. It got covered over as I got older, you know, like, you know, we're trained to do whatever we do in the world. You know, for me, it was getting the right grades at school and stuff.
Yeah.
But I actually found no real solace in the world either. I mean, I did seek it through relationships, so that played itself out. But in terms of, let's put it like this, money, career, possessions, home, security, family, children, none of that actually pulled me, much to the chagrin of my parents or my mother. So I was quite abnormal in that way. I'm not abnormal. I'm sure there's lots of people like that, but I was always in was my natural place. And so it was just a natural,
yeah, I get it. It's beautifully put. I can relate to that. Actually, I can relate to a lot of that. I also was like, I wasn't that fired up about making money and having a loud career, you know. I was into this from an early age. My archetype that I was really sort of into was like the wandering poet, basically.
Yeah. So I don't know. So maybe some of us are just born that way. Maybe that's just. I mean, who knows? That's the unanswerable question.
But isn't it? I think I'm fascinated. I want to hear how you. God, we ought to stop. But let me just make, just one last tiny point that I'm going to make. This will be the last one, I think, from me. But that it's like there's a sense that some of us get. I think I wonder if this is right or if you agree. Of like the very sense of self is a question. You know, it's like, what is this? And I wasn't even consciously thinking of it as a question, but somehow it was a question. I think that was like this burr under my skin or under my pants or something. You know, something about just this sense of self was driving itself to find out.
Yes.
And I don't know whether that's right, but I have some sense of that. Like there's a sort of existential force in the very sense of self to figure out what is it.
Yes, that's it. It's an existential question. And like, yeah, I too, that's why I went to university to study psychology, because that was the only outlet or inlet for that possibility of discovering. Of course, it didn't do that at all. I got lost in academia and it was a big disappointment and blah, blah. But I thought that's what I was going to uncover. Right. What is this? What is the self? What is the nature of self? I mean, it's a philosophical, existential question, not really a psychological question, but one that in the end is unanswerable by any knowledge, education, only the going in. But that was very alive in me from a very young age.
Yeah. That's very cool. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah,
that's very beautiful, and that kind of rounds it off. I'm tempted to say we're going to do a second one, because I think we didn't actually talk about the lived experience, how it shows up, what it's like after 5 years in a relationship, what it's like in dealing with the issues, the very fabric of the issues with life. And I'd like to, if that's possible and we're in agreement, at some point kind of reconvene and go from that point, because we've introduced it now and we've laid the groundwork. And we could, if you're up for it, Henry, we could kind of explore the lived experience of the awakened.
Yes.
Something.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
However, I've got to go and have a cup of tea now.
Me too. Oh man, this is really nice. God, thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to end the recording in a second. Just stay on, Henry, so we can just wind it up. But thank you so much, you guys. Thank you much, Henry. Thank you, Amoda, for your I don't know, for having this conversation, for diving in, for opening it up. So it's the only point of doing this is to assist people in getting into the nitty-gritty, the very fabric of what it means to bust, in my opinion, some of the illusions that we have around it, because only when those illusions get busted can something real, can something true happen. And that seems to be what's happening at the moment in this kind of a field that we're in. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Kavi, for facilitating it. It really enlivened the conversation, I think.
Yeah, thank you for having me, both of you. And it was really great to get to be with you like this. Really nice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And we'll see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast if it moves you. And we'll see you again soon. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.